Welcome to CogniTale, unlocking ancient stories, where forgotten tales whisper through time. I'm your guide into the shadows of history, unearthing secrets that cling to the edges of the world. Today, we're stepping into the misty hills of the Ozarks, America's hidden heartland, where a legend lingers like fog. It's called The Bone Whisperer, a story so strange, so haunting, it'll hook you from the first breath. Ready to dive into a tale of bones, curses, and voices no one should hear? Let's begin. Deep in the Ozark Mountains, Missouri, around the late 1800s, folks lived simple lives, hunting, farming, praying under wide skies. But whispers carried on the wind told of something else, something older. They spoke of Granny Hess, a hunched woman who lived alone in a shack near Devil's Hollow. She wasn't like the others, no sir. Her eyes glinted like chipped flint, her hands trembled over piles of bones, deer, fox, even human, some said. Granny didn't talk much, but when she did, it wasn't to the living. She'd sit by her fire, muttering to those bones, and folks swore they muttered back. It started small. A hunter lost his dog in the woods, found it days later, alive, but shivering, its collar tangled with the rib bone Granny had touched. Then a farmer's crops withered overnight after he'd laughed at her shadow crossing his field. Word spread. She could read the future in those bones, predict storms, deaths, even wars. But it wasn't a gift, oh no. It was a pact, they said, with something dark that clung to the Ozarks' roots. By 1892, her name was a curse you didn't speak loud. One night, a boy named Eli, barely 16, dared to find out. His pa had gone missing in a blizzard, and the town figured he'd frozen out there. Eli didn't buy it, not with Granny's shack glowing faintly through the trees. He grabbed a lantern, his breath fogging in the cold, and trudged toward Devil's Hollow. The wind howled, branches snapped underfoot, like the forest itself warned him off. He didn't turn back, not yet. He found her there, Granny Hess, hunched over a deer skull, her voice low and raspy, like gravel grinding. She didn't look up, just kept whispering, and Eli swore he heard a second voice, faint, hollow, coming from the skull itself. "What did you want, boy?" she croaked, finally meeting his eyes. Eli stammered about his pa, his voice shaking worse than the lantern light. Granny smirked, picked up a bone, a human one, cracked and yellowed, and tossed it into the fire. The flames hissed, spitting sparks, and she said, "He's gone, but he ain't quiet." Eli's gut twisted. He wanted to run, but his feet stayed planted, like the earth held him there. Granny leaned closer, her breath sour, her words sharp. "Bones talk, boy. They always do, if you listen right." She tapped the skull, and Eli heard it, a moan, low and mournful, rising from the fire. His pa's voice, he'd swear it, calling his name through the crackling flames. That's when Eli knew. Granny Hess wasn't just a hermit. She was something else, something the Ozarks feared and needed. The town didn't believe him at first. Eli ran back, babbling about voices and bones, but they called it a kid's nightmare. Until the next week, when a flood hit, just like Granny had muttered to her pile of ribs the night before. Houses washed away, cattle drowned, and folks started whispering her name again, not in scorn, but dread. What was she? A witch? A prophet? Or something worse, tied to the land itself? Now, let's sink deeper into this tale, where the Ozarks' shadows stretch long and cold. Granny Hess wasn't just a story to scare kids anymore. She was real, and her power was growing. You're hooked, right? Good, because this is where the whispers turn to screams, and the bones start telling secrets no one wants to hear. Stick with me. After the flood, folks in Devil's Hollow didn't laugh at Eli no more. They watched Granny's shack from afar, saw smoke curling from her chimney even in summer, heard strange chants on moonless nights. She'd wander into town sometimes, her sack clinking with bones, and people parted like she was death herself. Preacher John, a wiry man with a Bible worn thin, called her a devil's servant, said she'd curse the land. But even he crossed himself when she passed, her eyes locking on his like she knew his sins. Eli couldn't shake what he'd heard, his pa's voice in that fire, begging or warning, he couldn't tell. He went back, foolish or brave, you decide. This time, Granny was waiting, her shack door creaking open before he knocked. Inside, the air stank of rot and ash, bones stacked high along the walls, some fresh, some ancient, all humming faintly. She didn't speak, just pointed to a chair, and Eli sat, his heart hammering loud enough to wake the dead. She pulled a rabbit skull from her sack, its eye sockets dark as pits, and ran her fingers over it. "Ask," she rasped, and Eli blurted, "Where's my pa?" Granny closed her eyes, lips moving fast, and the skull trembled, actually shook in her hands. A voice came, not hers, but deep, like it clawed up from the earth. "Under the ice, boy. Under the ice." Eli's blood ran cold. He'd searched the frozen creek last winter, found nothing. Was it a lie, or had he missed something awful? Granny didn't stop there. She grabbed a bird bone, snapped it clean, and the room filled with a wail, not human, but wild, like a storm trapped in a cage. "Trouble's comin'," she said, her grin showing cracked teeth. "Bigger'n the flood. You'll see." Eli bolted, the wail chasing him through the trees, his lantern swinging wild. He didn't sleep that night, nor the next. Every creak in his house sounded like bones rattling. Days later, it hit. A fever swept Devil's Hollow, quick and cruel, taking kids first, then the old. Folks dropped like flies, their skin hot, their eyes glassy. Preacher John preached it was God's wrath, but others pointed at Granny. She'd predicted it, hadn't she? Eli saw her then, standing at the edge of town, whispering to a pile of chicken bones as the wind carried cries from the sick. She didn't look smug, just tired, like she bore the weight of every death. One man, Tom Carver, had enough. A burly blacksmith with a temper, he'd lost his wife to the fever. He grabbed his hammer, rallied a few others, and marched to her shack, shouting she'd pay. They found her by the fire, calm as stone, a deer antler in her lap. "You can't kill what's already gone," she said, and tossed the antler into the flames. The fire roared up, green and unnatural, and Tom swore he heard his wife's voice scream his name. He swung the hammer anyway, missed, stumbled, ran like the devil was on his heels. The mob fled, but the damage was done. Granny's shack burned that night. Some say they torched it, others say the fire just happened, like the land spat it out. She didn't scream, didn't run, just sat there as the flames took her. But here's the kicker. Next morning, the fever broke. No one died after that. Coincidence? Or something else? Hold tight, this is where the Ozarks bare their teeth and Granny Hess's tale twists into something you won't forget. The fire's out, but the story's just catching flame. You're in deep now, and the bones are about to sing their loudest. Let's go. The shack was ash by dawn, a black scar on Devil's Hollow, but Granny Hess wasn't done, not by a long shot. Folks thought burning her would end it, silence those cursed whispers. They were dead wrong. Days after, strange things crept in. Hunters found bones scattered in perfect circles deep in the woods, untouched by animals. Kids swore they heard giggles from the creek, where no one played anymore. And Eli, poor Eli, he couldn't escape her shadow. He'd dream of her, night after night, Granny's voice sharp in his skull. "Find me, boy," she'd hiss, her face half bone, half flesh, those flint eyes glowing. He'd wake soaked in sweat, the air in his room thick, like something watched him sleep. One morning, he found it, a finger bone, human, wedged under his pillow. No one in his house put it there, no one could have. He threw it out, but it was back the next day, cold against his neck. Eli told no one who'd believe him now. But the town felt it too. Old Man Reese, a trapper, came running from the hills, babbling about a voice in the wind, calling his name from a pile of elk bones. Widow Jane found her late husband's watch buried in her yard, wrapped in a fox spine that wasn't there before. The preacher stopped preaching, locked himself in the church, muttering prayers that didn't help. Something lingered, something tied to Granny, and it wasn't letting go. Then came the night that broke them. Eli, half mad from sleepless fear, grabbed his pa's rifle and headed back to the shack's ruins. The air was wrong, too still, too heavy, like the world held its breath. He found bones there, hundreds, piled where her fire once burned, gleaming white in the moonlight. They weren't random, ribs curved into arches, skulls stacked like a throne. And in the center, a shadow moved, not solid, but there, whispering. He aimed the rifle, hands shaking, and yelled, "What are you?" The shadow laughed, low and guttural, and the bones rattled, all of them, clattering like a storm of teeth. Granny's voice came, clear as day, from every direction. "I'm the land, boy. I'm the hollows, the roots, the blood you spill." Eli fired, the shot echoing loud, but the shadow didn't flinch. Instead, it grew, stretching long, and he saw her, Granny Hess, her body woven from bone shards, her grin wide and terrible. She stepped closer, and Eli dropped the gun, his legs jelly. "You burned me, but I ain't gone," she said, her voice splitting into a dozen echoes, his paws, Tom's wife's, every soul she touched. "Bones don't die, they wait." She reached out, a hand of antlers and claws, and Eli screamed, scrambling back as the ground shook. The bone pile collapsed, swallowing the shadow, leaving only silence, deafening, awful silence. He ran home, locked the door, but it wasn't over. Dawn broke, and the town woke to a sound, a low hum, rising from the hills, like a chorus of the dead. Folks gathered, pale and trembling, as bones washed up on the creek banks, dozens, then hundreds, all whispering names. Eli's among them, his pa's voice loudest, pleading, "Find me." The preacher broke his silence then, shouting it was Judgment Day, but no one listened. They knew who it was. By noon, the hum stopped, but the damage was carved deep. Devil's Hollow wasn't the same, folks left, houses emptied, the land felt alive in a way it shouldn't. Eli stayed, though, tethered to that voice, that curse. He'd hear it every night, soft but sure, pulling him back to the hollow. We've reached the endgame now, where the Ozarks' shadows settle, and Granny Hess's tale finds its restless close. This is the part that sticks with you, the final twist of the knife. Let's wrap it up. Eli couldn't run from it, the bone whisperer owned him now. He stopped fighting the dreams, stopped throwing out the bones that kept appearing under his bed, in his boots, even his coat pockets. He'd sit by the creek, listening, as his pa's voice mixed with others, a chorus of the lost. Folks said he went mad, but Eli didn't feel mad, just empty, like the hollow itself had carved him out. By 1895, he was a ghost too, wandering the hills, whispering back to the bones. Devil's Hollow faded after that. Families packed up, left the land, the wind, and the whispers. The shack's ruins grew over with vines, but hunters still avoided it. Too many stories of bones shifting in the dirt, of voices calling from nowhere. Some say Granny's still there, her spirit stitched into the Ozarks, waiting for someone new to listen. Others reckon she's the land itself, a curse older than the hills, fed by every drop of blood spilled on them. Historians dug into it later, found scraps of truth. A woman named Hester lived out there in the 1880s, a healer some called a witch, blamed for floods and fevers. No proof of bones talking, but the Ozarks hold secrets tight. Old native tales whisper of spirits tied to the earth, waking when the living get too greedy. Maybe Granny Hess was one of them, maybe not. What's sure is this: her story lingers, a chill you can't shake. Eli's last trace was a journal, found years later by a trapper. Scrawled inside, "They don't stop. I hear them all now." The final page had one word, scratched deep: bones. No one knows where he went, but the creek still runs cold, and some nights, if you're brave or dumb enough to stand there, you might hear it, a faint hum, a name on the wind. Granny's work, or just your mind playing tricks? You decide. That's it for The Bone Whisper of the Ozarks, folks. A tale of curses, voices, and a land that never forgets. Loved it? Hit that like button. Share it with your crew. Let's spread this hidden gem far and wide. Drop a comment. Ever heard a whisper you couldn't explain? Or don't like it? Tell us why. We're tough enough to take it. Subscribe to CogniTale, unlocking ancient stories for more lost tales, delivered with a grin and a shiver. Next up, we're chasing shadows in places you've never heard of. Stick around. It's gonna be wild.